Let's speak to our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott here. Isabel, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you doing this evening?
Good evening, very well, thank you.
Tell us about this controversy about Blair being apparently wrong to tell Starmer to back the Iran war. This is criticism from the serving Cabinet Minister, Steve Reid, speaking this morning.
Well, it breaks a convention. It's a sort of unwritten rule for former prime ministers not to go butting in on what their successors do, and all the more so if they are from the same party. So I can imagine just how very unwelcome it was to have that intervention from Tony Blair, particularly given his history with the Iraq War and how many people feel about how that played out and the way that he managed his alliances with the Americans at that time. So you would expect, I think, cabinet ministers and other Labour ministers to come out and say that Blair should not have said what he said. But I think a lot of our listeners will agree with Blair that the UK has not shown itself to be a reliable ally to the US in these very critical moments these last few days, and that may have long-term implications. Personally, I don't think it's irreparable in any shape or form under different leadership, but I think Donald Trump, once he's made his mind up about someone, yeah, he can kind of change on the surface. You know, we all know that he veers from one thing to another, but I think that Keir Starmer's blown it with Trump, and that may have some implications throughout the rest of his leadership.
Well, let's see what the Housing Secretary Steve Reid said to Sky News this morning. This is what Steve Reid said.
Tony Blair told a Jewish news event on Friday, I think we should have backed America from the very beginning. They were asking us to use our bases for refuelling. It's not like Vietnam. It's not like in Iraq.
Well, he's absolutely entitled to his view as well, but it will be the Prime Minister and the government that take decisions in the national interest.
But what do you think he's right then, Tony Blair, or not?
No, I don't agree with him. I think we need to learn lessons from Iraq over 20 years ago now, but there was a big inquest into that. There are lessons to be learnt. It is our government that will take decisions about what is in the British national interest.
Isabel, we're both old enough to remember the arguments around the Iraq War. Do you think there's much in this, or is this just a nervousness of the UK establishment, the government, saying, well, actually, there is, in their view, no legal basis to this? Many would argue against that, and actually something that we should shy away from. We don't want another Iraq, which, of course, Tony Blair will always be remembered for, so therefore this is something that they should shy away from. Do you understand that reticence, and do you understand their points?
Completely. And it's long been the case that polling has shown that British people do not want any more wars of choice. They don't want any more wars that they feel are discretionary, that we don't need to enter. And in fact, YouGov polling on this particular conflict shows about 58% of people are against UK involvement. The problem is that we don't necessarily get to choose. You know, there you've got Rachel Reeves standing up in the Commons today talking about the knock-on effect on our economy. Well, you know, yes, that's going to be very convenient for Rachel Reeves, a chancellor that's presiding over absolutely flatlining and a flatlining economy for pretty much her entire time in number 11, is now going to have a new excuse for why that growth that this government said they would put at the heart of their agenda has proven so completely elusive. But at the same time, by standing up there saying there is going to be an impact, you're acknowledging that the world is just too small and too interconnected to be able to just sit on the sidelines of a conflict like this. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you go in all guns blazing. There are different levels of support that we can give our allies, or by the same token, anti-Iranian regime actions that we could be taking very simply. For example, prescribing the IRGC, sending the Iranian ambassador packing and so on. There are symbolic things that we could be doing that stop well short of what I think British people fear, and that is the idea of sending in our brave men and women, service personnel, actually into Iran. And literally no one's talking about that in any case, boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, just turning to what's happening in Australia. 5 Iranian women's team players granted refuge in Australia. Donald Trump offering to fly the whole squad to safety in the United States. 5 have already been taken care of and the rest are on their way, says Trump. Some, however, feel they must go back because they're worried about the safety of their families, including threats to those family members if they don't return. In any event, the Prime Minister of Australia, that's Anthony Albanese, of course, doing a very good job having to do with this rather delicate situation. God bless Australia. It is a delicate situation for Iranians around the world, not just those who are living in Iran, and we've got to remember that, Isabel.
And there are, the Iranian diaspora is huge, and there's a huge number of them in the UK. I think you and I have talked about this already.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see that in terms of the turnout on our streets on these various anti-regime protests, and much smaller, I'm glad to say, pro-regime protests have been. But this is a case across Europe. I mean, I was in Austria a few weeks ago and found myself caught up in a huge anti-Iranian regime protest, and actually walked along with the marchers for a little bit. And the scale of this was extraordinary. And quite clearly, not everybody, of course, on that march was of Iranian heritage. They weren't all Iranian nationals, but there were a lot of them that clearly were.
Yeah.
This raises another question. I think there's a little bit of nervous discussion about this already, about whether or not the UK is potentially harbouring quite dangerous Iranian pro-regime sleeper cells. That is something I'm genuinely pretty worried about.
Well,
given
the new leader of Iran, the new Ayatollah, has 11 properties here as well, and there are many instances, as we know, a journalist who was stabbed about a year ago by Iranian operatives here. So when they're looking for places to go if their regime does fall, the UK is going to look pretty welcoming to them in many respects.
And that is really, really concerning. But I'm more worried at this stage about those that may already have been plotting ill within the UK for quite some time. And I don't know how well founded this is, but the early indications that perhaps that there is a whole sort of spider's web of these small groups and individuals that may be lying in wait, waiting for some kind of instruction. I don't want to spread, uncorroborated information, but this has been quite widely reported now. And I feel safe to repeat it because we know in the UK that there have already been terror threats by Iranian nationals.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence asked the big questions. Do you want to wear makeup and nail polish?
Brilliant. Well, it's great that we're just getting to the heart of what it really takes to be a capable, impressive reference armed forces. It's so disappointing. When I was writing a book on the state of the armed forces a few years ago, people were warning defence chiefs at that stage, senior figures in the armed forces were warning of a day like this coming, a day in which our lack of readiness was incredibly brutally exposed, and here we are. And yet, how are we diverting attention to these trivial matters? Even at that time, when I was writing that book in about 2019, something like that, the good news was that all around the world at that time, it was still the case that people looked up to the British Armed Forces. And I do really worry that that is being completely corroded away.
All of them were surveyed on woke, gender-free changes, which could see men wearing makeup with long hair or hair extensions, painted nails and earrings. The consultation from Army HQ asked soldiers if they agreed on rules on makeup should be gender-free, explaining that this means that men, women and non-binary service personnel can all wear makeup the same way. It includes natural eyelash extensions and nail polish, although this can't be of a bright colour. I'm sure that's a relief. Makeup being currently banned for men, they should have short hair which does not reach the collar or onto the ears. The review also suggests laying down rules for facial aesthetics, such as fillers and microblading, and for the first time, recovery periods for tattoos and piercings. Sorry, I can't fight because I've had a tattoo and I'm in a recovery period. This is where we are. I mean, it's absolutely absurd.
I mean, many of these things that you've listed are quite high maintenance. I mean, eyelash extensions, seriously? I mean, you don't want this stuff to be getting in the way of your ability to jump out of bed and respond to an urgent alert, to be doing whatever it is you're supposed to be doing to keep our country safe. I think it's nonsense. I haven't read the original survey. I don't know. I'm trying to think, is there some excuse for this? But I can't come up with one really.
How are things in Dubai at the moment?
So thank you for asking. We have had a much quieter day today. I'm afraid it's been tougher in Abu Dhabi, the neighbouring emirate here, and we've had less chucked at us by way of missiles, drones, and so on. There have still been a few, but it has been a lot calmer today. And whenever that happens, you sort of think, oh, well, can we relax a bit? Does this mean that the Iranians are running out of basically of ballistics and drones to throw in our direction, or does it just mean that there's a pause for some other strategic reason? Who knows? The real concern is that, as many of our listeners will know, the drones themselves that are being shot in the direction of the UAE are quite relatively cheap to make and easy to launch. Whereas the intercepts are extremely expensive and sophisticated. So it then becomes who can last longer in that situation.
Isabel, thank you very much. That's Isabel Oakeshott there, who's Talk's international editor. What do you think of